Accent.
Yeah.
Alright. Shall we start?
Yes.
Yes? Alright. All recording devices on? Yep. Well, welcome to the second session. My name is Arjan Cornelissen. I'm from the Netherlands. I'm an Office 365 architect. That's what I call myself. I've got my own company. Started 2 years ago. Mainly assisting companies with the move to Office 365. And in that part I noticed that a lot of companies have some scripts, do some steps to get the initial step, but doesn't think about the what comes after that. So this session is about what can you do to make sure that the initial setup supports the run in the later when you're really running in Office 365. So all my contact details are on here. I'm also an investor in attraction dating. That's something completely different than anything related to Office 365. It's a dating app that my girlfriend is building, and currently rolling out in the Netherlands and Belgium, and probably later on this year throughout Europe and the world. Also certified Office 365 and SharePoint. So one of the first things we always do at SharePoint Saturday is acknowledge all the sponsors. We've got platinum, gold sponsors. So visit the booths in the breaks that you have. They're here. They make this event happen. So really important to visit them, have a small chat with them. So so where do we start? I usually find it very interesting on starting at the core beginning. So with a empty building that's on the road to Office 365. So I first got a question for you. Who is already on Office 365 or is thinking to go to Office 365? So who's on? So that's almost the majority of you all. Anybody not on Office 365 thinking on going there? So it's, what I really like is, or what I see is that most companies, when they move to Office 365, they see, okay, we need all our users, 100, 200, 5,000 users into Office 365, and they write scripts and think about where to go, what to do in getting everybody in there. But don't think about what happens with the new people coming in when we're all in Office 365. So what happens with the joiners after that you are already 2 years into Office 365? They in the end need to have the same onboarding procedures as all your initial users. So what I really like is thinking on, okay, we have the green field, the clean Office 365, and from that moment on we need to think about not only the initial users, but also on the users that will be joining in a year, and also on the persons leaving in the end, because every company has joiners and leavers, of course. So we want to automate those kind of things because we don't want to have manuals in. You need to do these 200 steps to get a user in Office 365. So I'm going to show you a few options in how you can automate that. What tools you have in Office 365, and in Azure. And the first one is Azure Automation. So does everybody heard about Azure Automation or know what it is? Just 2-3 people, okay. So Azure Automation is running PowerShell scripts in a serverless environment. So you've got the, you can run any PowerShell script on your own computer, but your computer needs to be on to run the scripts. And in Azure Automation you can create schedules, have all kind of different kind of scripts running in the cloud environment. So it's not only PowerShell, but also Python. So you're not limiting to one language. And you also have, for the non-programmers, graphical runbooks. So you can drag and drop the commands into a graphic UI to make it a lot easier if you're not familiar with writing scripts. Other way of doing it is using Azure Functions. Anybody use that? Just also 2-3 people. So Azure Function is more of a developer tool. So you can write there C#, got the other .NET, Java, JavaScript, and PowerShell is in beta supported right now. But it's more on the developer side, not on the IT Pro. So the Azure Automation is more the IT Pro side, and this is more on the developer side, because this also has better integration with other Azure tools. I will go deeper in that later on. So these are those were the two main parts that I'm going to focus on today. But you also have Microsoft Flow, Logic Apps, and any other third-party tooling where you can make automated decisions in onboarding your Office 365 environment. Check my notes. Don't have any notes anyway. So let's dive into our Azure Automation. Let's just start here then. So Azure Automation, what I mentioned already, is running PowerShell scripts in a serverless environment where you can have any module that you are using on-premise into the Azure environment. If you don't have enough power in the Azure environment, because it's Azure Automation has some limits in the duration that scripts can run, in the modules that you can load. You can also use Azure Automation in a hybrid environment. So Azure Automation sends a command to a hybrid machine, and your scripts is run on that machine. You also can have in that hybrid machine, it can be an on-premise machine as well. So that machine can query to your local AD, or to your local Exchange environment, or to your SAP environment if you want to have those kind of connections as well. One of if you create a new Azure automation environment, the first thing you've got to ask is how do you want to handle security in the Azure in the automation environment. There you have a few options. By default, you can add a run as account. This will create an application in Azure AD, and that application by default can access all your Azure resources. So your Azure storage or any of the other 300 or 400 services that are in Azure already. You have a classic and a regular modern version of the connection. This one uses the certificate in the Azure AD application, and this one uses the service principal. What you also can do is just regular credentials, so a normal username and password. But if you have modern authentication enabled with multi-factor authentication and everything, this one doesn't work because there is no pop-up possible for your multi-factor. So the best way to use is if you run as accounts, and if you're querying against SharePoint, for instance, you need a secret as well, and you can store those in variables. I will demo later on how to use all the different kind of authentication methods. If you have, by the way, any questions on everything I'm asking, just raise your hand and ask the questions. So no need to write them down and hold them. So what it makes is an Azure AD application in your tenant, and it is the name of the automation account that you create with a ugly string. So that's by default. And if you want to address anything in SharePoint, you need to use an app registration into SharePoint itself. Because if you only use the Azure AD application, it doesn't have any rights to do it in SharePoint. So you need to go to the tenant level, if the application needs to be on the tenant level, and then add the XML on it. I will show that in a moment. And a very important part is that you need to allow the app only policy that it's true. Otherwise, it doesn't work. And the easiest way is to use the Azure PnP PowerShell module. So everybody knows that? The PnP module? I'm going to show you in a moment how to use that one as well. So if you're going into a hybrid environment, what you need is an agent on a VM or virtual machine or on on-premise. That can be a cloud VM, an AWS VM, or any can be located anywhere. And that agent has an outbound connection to the Azure automation environment. So you need to register it once, and no internal, no incoming firewall rules. Just a standard 443 outbound connector. Any questions about this part so far? I'm gonna jump into a demo to make it more clear and where you can find everything in the Azure portal, and how to configure some of these items. So if we're going to the Azure portal, I just created a dashboard to get every feature quick and easy. But if you don't have your favorite setup, you can find them on all services. So let me go into creating a new one. So here you can just give the name, give the resource group, your location, and this part is created an Azure Run As account. So that's the Azure AD application is created just with a yes or no. So you don't have to do any configuration into Azure AD. That will be handled all for you. And if you want to have, if you already have an Azure Automation subscription without your Run As, there's a manual from Microsoft where you can configure your current Azure Automation to start using a Run As account. So if you already have those, you can use that link there. You can create some time, so I already prepared an automation for you guys. So by default, if we go down to connections, so the shared resources connections, this is where you find the default connection that is created with the Run As account. You can add your own credentials. This can be anything like just an Office 365 login, or SendGrid login, or your Google login, or just any username password combination. If you have a certificate authentication, you can add those here. Within modules, so in PowerShell everything is built up with modules. You can find all the default modules here, and also update them from Azure. So it's not updated by default to make sure that your scripts are not breaking. So you can update them here. And also you can add your own modules. So if you have a PowerShell module written yourself, you can upload it here as a zip file and use it here as well. It does need to support .NET, so no strange thing can be using. Or you can go to the PowerShell gallery and download them from there. So if you want to query to Azure Active Directory, for instance, just search on Azure AD, and then go. You can click on them, click the import button, and it will import that module into your automation environment. The PowerShell gallery, you can also find that one by going to PowerShellGallery.com. So I already installed the Azure AD preview, and to connect to SharePoint, I installed the SharePoint PnP PowerShell Online. So that's the module for connecting to PowerShell, to SharePoint. If you go to Runbooks, by default you will get these 5 as an example to get you started in how does it work. So if we just open the automation tutorial as a graphic runbook, we can go and edit this one. Here you see in a graphical way what we're going to do. So first is getting a run-as connection, so the connection to the connection string, log into Azure, get all resource groups, find all the Azure resources, and write a name and type into the output window. So it's a very simple way of getting started. And it's as easy as opening here the commandlets, go into the module that you want to have, and click here on add to canvas. That's not add canvas. Oh, there it is. And from that part on, you can start building. And as I select this one, I get you can configure the parameters that the command would needs to use. I've got multiple of those, so delete. You can save and then publish the runbook. There is no version control in here. So if you have any scripts running that you want to have, there are 2 versions. That's the draft version and the published version, and that's it. When you publish it, the draft version will be deleted. So if you want to make sure that you have a version control, you need to use GitHub or Azure DevOps to store your scripts in here. So be aware of that. And then you got the regular runbooks. So I prepared this one, or at least copy pasted a lot of it. I will zoom in a bit because I don't think it's big enough on in the back. Is this readable in the back as well? Yeah. Okay, perfect. Well, there's not a lot behind it. So to get the service of the service principal, so the run-as account, it's fairly easy to get automation connection with the connection name that is stored in the connections blade. Getting a variable is getting automation variable. So they're very common names, and then you can use the tenant ID. That's part of the principal connection, application, and certificate thumbprint, and that will authenticate against, in this case, Azure. Azure Active Directory uses a similar principle, and the PnP Online uses the app ID from the Azure AD application and the app secret. So that's something you need to create after that the run-as account is created. I wrote a complete blog post about how to configure the SharePoint connection with the Azure AD application. So all slides will be shared afterwards, I guess. All the slides will be shared to the participants. So in the comments you'll find a link to the particular blog post how to do that. And when your script is done and you have published it, you can create several schedules to runbook, and you can also have one schedule connected to multiple runbooks. So if you have a few tasks or a few reports that need to be run every month at the same time, you can just create one schedule, connect that to several runbooks, and then they will run there. One benefit of using Azure Automation as well, the first 500 minutes that runs, that your runbooks is running in each month are free. So there's no payment needed for that. But one customer, we have about 20-25 runbooks running during the month. Some scripts are running every 2 hours, some scripts once a week or once a month. And in total, that user has about 20,000 users in there. We pay about 80 euros a month on Azure Automation, and that will provide all the reports, flattening groups for Azure AD applications, all the tasks that we found out that we needed, even reports of who is using multi-factor authentication, who has registered for multi-factor authentication, without needing to pay the Azure AD 2 licenses, because that's a default report from that one. And what you also can have is a webhook in here. So what we have with this customer is we've got one script that has an overview of all the groups that need to be flattened, and another script that does the actual work. We first had it in one script, but it took too long to run. It took about an hour and a half to run. So we split that up and used a webhook to call the second script in parallel. So all the complete time of execution went down to about 5 to 10 minutes for all the groups, instead of having to wait for the bigger groups. I guess that was everything I want to. No, one more thing. For the hybrids, you have the options in the main blade on the hybrid worker groups. You can create one or multiple machines that work as a group. So the hybrid connection doesn't have to be just one machine. It can also run on 5 machines, and the Azure Automation will figure out what machine to run what script. So you can configure it very easy by just adding configure, and this will give you a link to the Microsoft documentation. Here you see the image I used in my presentation. How to install the hybrid worker and how to connect it to the Azure Automation account. So it's a very thorough manual to just walk through. So, I'm very happy with all the new documentation from Microsoft actually. Any questions about automation?
Yeah, I would love to know what are the real targets in the real world for this, because I can imagine I have flow to make some kind of integration. Maybe I can trigger some Azure functions too.
Yeah.
I can launch by hooks and these kind of things, but now I have an O2. What is the main target of these two? Because I can imagine it's maybe like Node-RED or these kind of things, or which are the target?
Yeah, well, mainly the scripts that run on a schedule. So if you have, I can show you the scripts that we have at this customer. There's no real actual.
We have a schedule now in flows.
Yeah, that's an option just to do that. I cannot really make them bigger, but for instance, enable archive on every mailbox that runs every 2 hours. Make a report on who has MFA enabled. That's just a script that runs every week. I'm currently building that one, but it needs to run every week. Report all kind of mailboxes, the mail flow of a set of mailboxes. You can a lot of things you can do with flow as well, but the main benefit is that these scripts, the first 500 minutes in total of all these scripts combined is for free instead of having all your flow runs counted against it. And we started out, these are the 4 scripts that started out all, is starting and stopping the acceptance environment and test environment of SharePoint on Azure. So we started using automation at this customer, I guess 4-5 years ago. So when it was there was no function, there was no flow, there was no no other option than just PowerShell on a VM normally, and then I saw this. Okay, wow, this worked way better than having that running on an extra VM.
So they are like the task.
The task schedule in Windows. But instead of having a full VM running there, it's serverless on Azure. That's actually what you're doing. But we're syncing on-premise dynamic distribution groups, for instance, because that doesn't sync by default. Sending out AD users to certain systems. So getting every AD user and put a CSV file on a FTP server. That's what we're using for this customer.
You are trying to. You are using that for something that is on a time basis scale, maybe daily, maybe weekly.
Yep.
For heavy load things, heavy load tasks.
Yes.
Because in functions we have a time limit.
Yep.
And in flow we have a runs limit.
Yep.
So
and
this is your
and here you've got the by default 500 minutes for free, and if you don't do anything, it will stop after 500 minutes. You need to actually switch that it can consume credits. So that's you can find that switch. I need to find out. If you go to, I believe something pricing. Here you go. It's I'm not able to enable it even. But my default now is basic, and that will give me the 500 free minutes. Otherwise, I guess I'm going to the pricing details here. 0.2 cents a minute. So very cheap. And then you've got all kind of other updates, but it's 0.2 cents a minute extra. So we're running it in about in total it's just over full time at this customer, and that's costing around 80 euros a month. And that's every minute of the day runs the script. And that's 80 euros. So you have a lot of scripts running to make it very expensive. And for 80 euros, we can run a VM running in total.
Thank you.
Right? Run that one. Let's get back in here. Oh. Turn off the data. Wow. button. There we go. So another option, like you mentioned, is Azure Function. It's more on a programmatic way because it's mainly used by .NET developers running small scripts, maximum limit of 10 minutes. But you've got a lot more options in how to trigger it, where in Azure Automation we only have time-based and webhook as a trigger. Here we have an Azure Storage Queue, Cosmos DB, Event Grid, Service Bus, blob storage, webhooks. So a lot more triggers and possibilities to integrate into a workflow of tasks. So you can start out with a flow, for instance, and that one will trigger as a function that does some work, or make a custom application that will trigger Azure functions. So security-wise, there are also two options. Azure AD integration, also enabling by just clicking a button, and that will make the Azure AD application, or use function and admin keys for HTTPS triggers. So for the webhooks. I believe there's a deeper session about Azure functions. So if you really want to know all the ins and outs, there's also a session about that. Way better integration with, for instance, logic apps. So you can trigger the whole flow in the processes that you have. Azure Blob Storage is an interesting one because if, for instance, you have profile photos stored on an Azure Blob, for instance, you can run an Azure function to make sure that that photo is imported into your Exchange mailbox, so that photo is available for, on a high resolution throughout the whole Office 365 environment. So when you onboard a new colleague, his photo is taken that is stored on Azure Blob Storage, and that will be put into the user mailbox, not into Azure AD. It's not that good of AD because that, the resolution is pretty small. And then in Teams and Skype for Business, you've got a blurry photo. And also, of course, integrations into Office 365. So you can use the same PowerShell scripting integration as in Azure Automation. So let's go to that one. Let's go back to my dashboards. Going into the overall Azure Automation, you can go to Platform Features, and then where is it? Authentication Authorization, where you can use the service authentication. This also will create an Azure AD application. This is the same as with the Azure Automation, just a flip of a switch that will give you that integration. And by default we get one trigger, and this one is always very slow at my location. This one is using .NET, where you can build your own .NET, but this is a PowerShell, I mean, that will get a HTTP trigger, get a query name, and then print it out fairly easy. If you click on the plus here, you can see all the triggers. So you've got HTTP timer, queue. So this is your starting point, and you can create a new one from. And since this is based on the Azure functions. You can build it in for instance, Visual Studio Code and with GitHub, so you've got a better integration with the DevOps environment. So for the more developers, this is probably a better solution than Azure automations. Very good. So what to automate already said, mentioned a few, setting the user's location. This is a very important one. If you don't set a user's location on your AD users, you cannot set a license. So the user location is very important. There are two ways you also can use in Azure AD, the property, country. There are three properties: country, C, and C that needs to be set. If those are set, then the user location is set to the values that are in those properties. So your local AD is a very important one in that part. You can combine certain AD groups if you have Azure AD application. Those do not support nested AD groups, for instance. So you need to flatten those. There you can use the automation for setting licenses if you don't use the Azure AD licensing options. Run several reports or synchronize SharePoint user profile properties. So by default there are just a handful of properties synced from Azure AD into SharePoint. You can use PowerShell to synchronize the company name or other extension attributes into your profile properties. For most of these scripts, you can find examples on my blog. So those are the automations options that you have in Office 365 and Azure, but there are already also third-party toolings. For instance, with ShareGate, you can automate with ShareGate PowerShell, but you need to do that on a VM, a virtual machine that has the license for ShareGate. Probably a less known tool is Ethereum Sapio 365. That's a tool where you can set and configure and report on everything within Office 365. Everything that's available through the REST API, you can find in that tool. And you can also use automate certain reports there in that tool as well. And of course, AvePoint, you can run several reports and automate certain tasks in there as well. Are there any questions about anything I told, or any automation questions that you have where I can help you with? No questions at all? Was it that clear? All right, then I have a bit before time. So there are t-shirts, I guess, for any questions if you have. So nobody dares. Even Morina?
I care deeply, but
okay.
I just no questions about automation here.
Okay, perfect.
Most of us are new to it, so most of us are new to it, so
yeah.
It takes them absolutely.
All right. Yeah. If you have any questions when you're going to play with it, send me a question on Twitter or LinkedIn, or contact me through my website, and if I can help on any way, I will help you further. So.
Definitely check out the video.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.